Let's say you're a man in America, or better yet, a man in America who owns guns, and you don't own a 1911. Well, there's good news. There's two options. Option number one, you could move to Canada where they will welcome your non-masculine and non-patriotic ways.
Or you can accept the holy American charge and embrace the manifest destiny that is owning a 1911.
Let's say you selected option number two. Then the next question arises. What should you get? With over 100 years of production in history, the 1911 landscape is vast. Now, I consider myself to be a 1911 guy. And even for me, it's hard to be knowledgeable on the platform in totality. From the battlefields of World War I to modern day guns outfitted with red dots and suppressors, the rabbit hole is deep. Which is why today we're taking you on a historical tour of the 1911 through the lens of its various eras. Welcome to the show. I feel like there's an immense amount to cover today.
It's honestly, it's too much. It's too much.
It is. It is.
Yeah.
But this video sort of started as one thing and then sort of evolved to another thing as we started talking about it. So here's the deal. Our goal is to help you understand the various sort of eras of 1911s, right? And we're going to be breaking it into pre-war, post-war, but we're sort of just labeling neo-vintage, which would be like the series era of 1911s, and then modern production. The disclaimer to this is any one of those four sections could be a series of videos.
Absolutely.
So you're talking about things that where it's like, hey, look, we got about 10 minutes to give you some background on pre-war 1911s.
Sure.
To say scratching the surface would be understatement. So just understand, hey, this is broad strokes. If you guys really like this and you're like, hey, go deeper down these paths of pre-war guns or whatever it is, we can definitely do that, right? So we'll kind of lean on you guys for some comments and feedback on that.
I'd love to be back on the channel to talk about old guns.
We'll see how it goes today. We'll see how it goes. You've only had one Bang energy drink.
I know. I'm pretty calm right now.
Yeah. Once you have two,
44 mag territory.
yeah. Spicy. So for people that don't know you, why don't you say hello and tell them who you are?
Well, hey y'all, I'm Eli with Alchemy Custom Weaponry and Cabot Guns. We are a custom 1911 manufacturer, so it kind of makes sense. We're doing a 1911 video. I myself, Prophet of John Moses Browning, I think is really the best way to put that. I believe I am his vessel, and through me he speaks. And that, he asked me to tell y'all, you need to stop carrying these polymer guns. And what we're going to do is going to learn you up on some 1911s. Hopefully you watch this and you think, yeah, you know what, I really lived life a little bit on the,
A little vanilla.
Yeah, a little vanilla, a little missionary. And I'm trying to get you into to try other things. And when you really get a hold of a 1911, okay, it's an emotional experience, but not only that, they're pretty awesome to shoot. And as an American, it's just a gun you have to own. Have to.
Required.
And every time I see Americans slandering the 1911, I just want to take away their citizenship. Honestly, I don't know if free speech applies to that.
Yeah, I'm on board for it. So before we get into pre-war guns, a couple other thank yous. Guys, here's the deal. To being American, not own a 1911, as we've kind of alluded to, is a bit criminal. And maybe check the man card
Communism.
or check your American card. If you need to get a 1911, National Armory would be a great place to go do it. Here's the funny thing. We've been there because we went there on the hunt for Gucci guns, and they actually had some really cool shit.
We had some super cool shit. Remington Rand.
Rand.
They had the Springfield Armory. 1916
Properly
gun,
one,
or proper 19, Springfield Army. They had plenty of revolvers. I mean, if you're
some hardball thing you talked about.
Oh yeah,
I don't know what
the
that
National
was.
Match Remington Rand. Yeah, that's the hardball gun. Here's the deal. If you decide, hey, I want to kind of get into this FUD gun stuff, which it's super cool, by the way. They kind of got it.
It'd be a good place to go check it out. Not just local or, local, hey, if you're in the Pittsburgh area, but check them out online. Just look up National Armory. They also pick up a lot of used stuff, which is why their inventory is so cool. So, hey, if you got some stuff to move, check them out. You guys can go to their site, website, or code you guys can plug in. It's just 1911. That'll save you guys 10% off, which, hey, that could be pretty substantial if you really start playing that game. So scope that out. Appreciate their support. On with the show.
Now, I do want to make a little bit of a disclaimer myself. You're going to see me look at notes. That is so that I don't go on a hour-long tangent about one particular manufacturer of pre-war gun. These are to help me keep on track. So if you see me glance down, just understand this is for your pleasure.
It's for your pleasure,
not mine.
Yeah.
So we're going to start with my favorite era of 1911s, I think, and that is the pre-war era. Now, the pre-war era is kind of defined as 1911 because 1911s there were some 1911s delivered in 1911. Very early guns, very beautiful guns, by the way. Absolutely gorgeous guns.
Got to be massively collectible.
Oh, I mean, unheard of collectible. In fact, the Colt Archive, I believe they're selling a 1912 gun right now, and I want to say it's double digits or like 10
plus.
10 plus, yeah. Sure. But it's in pretty good condition, and it's badass.
Sure.
So we kind of define that era as 1911 and 1945. Of course, that's going to span some pretty, honestly, iconic history for the 1911. World War I, World War II, of course. Then you have the gangster era of the interwar period. But one kind of note I kind of want to make in this is that the 1911, a lot of people don't think about it, is the last great Western handgun. Okay. So what I mean by that is we fought on horsebacks with 1911. In 1916, and in fact, I do want to back up a little bit. The 1911s were used in like a banana wars, super gangster time in American history. A lot of people may not agree with that, but I do. But one of the most stop doing that. You just use it use the serrations. They put them on the back there. You tacked a. Okay, there you go.
So don't.
I mean that just looked weird, but okay. So of course in 1916. Punitive expedition into Mexico after Pancho Villa, after he raided New Mexico. Okay. So we were on horseback, cavalry. I mean, the gun was designed for horseback use originally. So with that, I kind of want to go through some quick changes. Again, I can get on a hell of a tangent that I'm already starting to go down, but I want to get into some things that you're going to want to know if you go to look at pre-war guns. Pre-war guns are usually going to be defined by 1911s and 1911 A1s. The A1 came in about 1924. The U.S. Army was kind of taking some of the stuff they've learned over the first 10-ish plus years of having the 1911, and they wanted to make some changes. And those changes I'll list for you kind of in order of how they changed for the 1911 A1. Okay. So we went to a shorter trigger. Okay, as you can see there, versus the longer trigger. We had added frame scallops. Actually, funny little plug here, Alchemy Custom Weaponry, our frames actually are like the pre-24 original 1911, because we kind of wanted to have that little homage. Okay. The arch mainspring housing was added. Of course, versus the flat mainspring housing. Yep. You have a longer grip safety on the 1911 A1, yep. Shortened and thin hammer spur. The 1911 A1 actually won't tear you up in the way that the 1911 will. If you shoot a 1911, a true 1911, you will be offering your blood to the gods. I mean, it will absolutely tear you up.
I mean, because if you see where that hammer would be if I'm using a high grip, it's already contacting skin. Absolutely. Now imagine that happening.
I actually have. You can tell the difference in like my hands. Like it's almost like a divot here from how much I shoot pre-war guns. So It'll work on you.
It's like a badge of honor.
I know, I love it. And honestly, dude, when I shoot my pre-war guns, I always try to schedule them when I'm going to shoot with like someone who shoots some wussy polymer gun. You know, they use these polymer guns so they can keep their hands soft for their boyfriend. And I'm over there bleeding all over. I mean, literally just blood dripping off of me, carrying a gun that probably shot at some Germans. It's great.
Yeah.
Got a wider front sight on that 1911A1. Simplify. I actually personally prefer the 1911's thinner sight, and then simplified grips. Of course, these have the beautiful double diamonds, which have made a big comeback in modernity. A lot of people enjoy the look of them. They're gorgeous. And then you have the iconic kind of plastic grips. Of course, there were a full checkered stock. They didn't immediately go to the plastic grip. That's a World War II kind of deal. They had checkered walnut stocks, I believe, for commercial guns in the 20s and 30s. So we're kind of going to focus a little bit on war guns because that's usually what people think about when they think pre-war, right? War guns, World War II. I do want to make the quick caveat that the pre- or interwar period of 1911s are some of the most gorgeous ones ever made. They're absolutely beautiful.
Are they from a buyer's perspective easier or cheaper to get because they're not war guns?
No. To be honest, all pre-war guns are going to be typically fairly expensive.
Okay.
The two here are ranging from about $2,500 to $5,000.
Yeah, as I've sort of budgeted out, because I don't even have a pre-war gun.
Right, you should.
I know. But I'm kind of going, all right, about $3,000 probably about kind of where I'm going to have to go.
And the commercial guns, which are nicer than the war time guns, and it makes sense, right? They actually command a pretty hefty price tag as well.
Because they're just probably in better shape.
Yeah, well, and they're honestly really nice. It goes back to that registered Magnum thing we've talked about. The registered Magnum was a symbol of pride that you had in your product. The Colt government model was really, they took a lot of pride in the interwar period.
Okay.
So focusing mainly on war guns right now. We got to talk about World War I, who made 1911s. That would be the Colts Manufacturing Company, of course. And they actually, before World War I, had a contract to allow Springfield Armory. This is not Springfield Armory that makes the Echelon or whatever the hell. It is the U.S. The U.S. Ordnance Springfield Armory at Springfield, Massachusetts.
Right.
So they actually made them prior to World War I. In fact, there was two methods they were going to make 1911s on. They were going to do them kind of in tandem with the rifles, Springfield rifles. Of course, they chose to make one or the other. And then when war were declared in Europe, they decided to focus their manufacturing efforts on the rifles rather than the handguns.
Okay.
So they actually didn't. I don't believe they actually made guns during the war. So all your Springfield guns, I believe, are just directly pre-World War I.
Okay.
And then Remington UMC, which we have there. We'll talk about that gun in a minute, unless you want to talk about it right now.
It's your show, man. I'm just along for the ride.
We'll talk about the Remington UMC then. So the Remington UMC is a good example of the industrialization. I'm trying to clean up my accent for you, of America during wartime. So these were manufacturers that would supplement Colt's production of 1911s.
Sure.
The U.S. actually they wanted to supply almost every single soldier with a handgun, which is unheard of even today.
Sure, yeah.
And certainly was unheard of at that time. In Europe, most people only officers had handguns for the most part, and those guns were really more ceremonial than a fighting gun. So this gun right here was made in November of 1918, so never saw combat in World War I. Only 21,000 Remington UMCs were made. So that is actually a very, very, and especially in the condition that gun's in, it's all original, even down to the grips and the magazine. There's actually some differences between Colt and Remington UMC magazines. That is a Remington UMC magazine. They are very, very collectible, very, very nice guns to have. And it's funny because they were delayed in manufacturing because the U.S. Ordnance Department wanted to be 100% parts compatible with Colts, and they could only get to about 90%. So there is some issues there with parts compatibility across the board, but it's minor. That is the smallest U.S. Government contract run of a 1911, with the exception, and I know there's people that's already starting to type, with the exception of the Singer 1911 A1s.
Oh, yeah. So I've heard of it. I don't know a lot about them, but I'm aware.
The Singer 1911 A1s, I don't consider those a real government contract because they were what's called an educational contract. So they actually were made prior to World War II and kind of to try to see if other companies who weren't traditional firearms manufacturers could make guns. And they actually did a really good job at them, but we'll talk about that in a little bit too. I have a note on them. The armistice happened kind of out of the blue. I mean, a lot of people didn't expect the war to end in 1918. And so Remington UMC had a very large contract, and they were only allowed to finish it through, I believe, spring of 1919. So only 21,000 guns total were made. Because, of course, the U.S. Army canceled their contract once the war ended. This particular gun, the story on it is that a bomber pilot carried it in World War II.
Cool.
Now, this is
two or one?
No, two.
Okay.
Because this gun was too late for World War One.
Oh, so this
gun was manufactured the month the war ended.
But in World War II.
Oh, absolutely, because the U.S. Army kept all those guns.
Yeah, sure.
Actually, in the beginning of World War II, a lot of the 1911s you see are original 1911s.
Okay, yeah, I'm tracking.
I mean, because it's not like they're
they were fine.
I mean,
yeah,
basic same gun.
I mean, we're still using Beretta 92s sometimes.
Absolutely,
it's like
it's better than what we have. The gun we have adopted
by a wide margin.
But I do want to make this note for you as a 1911 collector. Never, ever buy the story. Buy the gun.
Okay.
So this is something that I
would struggle on this. I'm a story guy.
Right. And so unless there is caveats to this, there's obviously if someone that really means a lot to you and there's an emotional story with that gun through them, I think then that is an exception. But you always see it at gun shows, and an old timer told me that one day, and I never forgot it. And it's like, this gun is, the gun that killed Hitler. You know what I mean? They have these crazy claims of these guns were here, these guns were there, this gun was on the Omaha Beach. But if you don't have some sort of paperwork to document that, I never buy a gun off the story, unless again it's an emotional connection with the person I'm buying.
Sure.
So while I was told that this gun was carried by a World War II bomber pilot, there's no
evidence.
There's no evidence. I think I can get a Freedom of Information Act request and possibly figure out if that was sent to a unit. They're kind of hit and miss.
Yeah.
You can do it with war guns, but they're hit and miss. They're very hit and miss. The United States did not keep good records of their small arms. So, anyways, that is my kind of dad advice to you, the viewer, is don't buy the story, buy the gun.
Okay. That's a pro tip.
Yeah.
And so like I said, I would have broken that rule.
Well, it's okay. I mean, if you genuinely like the gun,
do your thing.
Nothing wrong with that.
But yeah, okay.
So then we go to World War II. Again, I kind of gave you the caveat of the interwar commercial guns. They're fantastic, by the way, so just understand that, but they are expensive. We go to World War II, Colt, Ithaca, Remington, Rand, which that is right there, Union Switch and Signal, and as we mentioned earlier, Singer made 1911s that served in World War II, 1911 A1s that served in World War II.
Okay.
In contrast to the Remington UMC, which was one of the lowest, if not the lowest, contract for 1911s. I believe Springfield Armory was only $25,000, so I think it is lower than that. That is the highest contract. They made, I think, 875,000 Remington Rands, during World War II.
Jeez.
They're very highly sought after. They were honestly, they were extremely consistent guns. They didn't start that way. Shameless plug if you don't mind. I actually have a detailed video on this gun that talks about Remington Rand and the Remington Rand M1911 A1 on my channel, 1776 Duck. So if you'd like to learn more, there it is. Shameless plug. But anyways, they're as far as war guns, they're extremely well made. They actually had they were very popular post-war
It's a pretty tight gun.
I mean, yeah, as
far as
things go, yeah. Actually,
like,
the reason it feels a little tighter is on old surplus guns and really loose guns, I use grease instead on the rails instead of all.
Okay. What?
Don't make me do this again. You know what I'm saying? All. Okay.
ALL.
All. Like, you lather yourself up in baby oil. All right, we're moving on because you always like to make fun of my heritage.
I'm just learning. I'm just here to learn.
A little buyer's tip for you. This is going to be the heaviest one, by the way. So a little buyer tip for you. You want to look through for consistent finishes throughout the pistols when you're looking at these guns, okay? For original guns specifically, you can look at that gun and it's very clear of both of these guns that they are original finish and that they are consistent throughout their finishes.
Yeah.
There's going to be heat treating marks, so this is a big deal, and we'll get to this later on. Actually, no, we'll talk about it right now. One big thing you need to understand is these guns were not heat treated the way a modern 1911 is. They're pretty soft steel, especially in the 1911 realm. Like, they're not great guns for base guns, and if you shoot them a lot, you need to be on top of your mainspring and your reaction spring changes because you can beat the gun up. I mean, the steel is just not extremely hard. It's very soft steel. If you actually, and I think you've noticed it, there are a few spots of discoloration in this finish, specifically towards the end of the gun, if you hold it in the right light. That's because they began spot heat treating the guns in World War II. So like certain parts that were prone to breaking, they would kind of spot heat treat them. And there's usually discoloration in the finish that's Parkerizing, by the way. The other thing you want to familiarize yourself with is inspector marks and ordnance marks. You can see here, famously, the Remington UMCs have the EEC inspector mark. That's the eagle over there. And then, of course, these have plenty of inspector marks on them.
There's the couple of marks over here.
Yep, and then you have the ordnance mark behind the grip there.
There's you won't be able to really see it on camera. There's
it's kind of hard to see.
Mark that's back here on the frame.
The biggest thing I can tell you here, you have to familiarize yourself with these markings, and the best way to do that, reference guides. Don't go off of videos. You need physical, actual books to understand a lot of that stuff. And honestly, like when I go and I'm like hunting for one of these guns, I have a reference guide, like a big, thick book that I take with me.
Hell yeah.
And like, buyers usually know you're pretty serious when you lay the smacketh down on that table and you start looking through there. If they're trying to hide something, they get real nervous. You can usually watch and see them kind of squirming.
For any of our viewers that might not read a lot, can you get that like on an audio? Is that like on a?
No, I don't think they make that an audio.
Like a Kindle? Can you get that on a Kindle?
Maybe. Mine's a real book. Like you can have a real book.
Papers and
yeah. I'm not saying you have to read it like nightly, but it's a good,
You read it nightly though, don't you?
It's a good book. It's a good book.
Only
to have.
Monday through Saturday.
Yeah, it's a good book. Yeah, it's a good book to have. It's a good book to keep with you if you are really hunting these. And there's plenty of them. Clausen's is famous. I have the Poier third guide that I use. It's inexpensive. It's not complete. There's a few holes in it, but for most people's taste, it'll do what you need it to do. Re-arsenal gun. That's always a thing that comes up. There's keep in mind. I believe after 1945, the government never really bought 1911s after that. Like we just kept using the same one. So guns would go through what's called re-arsenal. They'd go to arsenals, most famously like Augusta, Anniston, that sort of thing. Ogden actually had a arsenal as well.
Oh yeah.
And these guns would be, fit with different slides, different frames. Typically the guns would come in, parts would go in buckets, and then they would clean them, inspect them, and they just reassemble the guns. However, they would never put them back together correctly.
Yeah.
So when you're looking at re-arsenaled guns, you want to look for a thicker finish than that shows. It's going to, and honestly, the Parkerizing almost looks like whiter.
Okay.
You want to look at the arsenal markings. This is another one where reference guides are huge, but like AA equals Augusta Arsenal, AN is Anniston.
Okay.
You're going to look at mismatched parts. A flat mainspring housing on a gun that has the scallops. A 1911, a Remington UMC slide on a Ithaca frame.
Got it.
That's going to be a dead giveaway that it's a re-arsenal gun of some kind.
Sure.
So with that, that is a super brief. As long as that was, a super brief kind of intro to the pre-war gun and what to look for. They are fantastic. They are an excellent piece of American history, and I highly suggest you should have one. The shooting experience, if you are familiar with modern 1911s, is not fantastic, but damn it, it makes you want to slide into a trench and start cutting Jerry's down.
Yeah, okay. Well, with that said, let's take you over to the range.
All right, Remington Rand. So we're going to talk about this gun as far as shooting it. The interesting thing about Remington Rands, well, not only just Remington Rand, we'll go with military surplus 1911s, okay? People don't realize these guns were the original combat gun. Everybody thinks, oh, you got to have a combat 45. It's got to be a custom gun. Not necessarily the case. I mean, this has seen a lot of combat. You know?
Did some work.
This Germans, they don't like these guns. You know, they're 0-2 against 1911s.
Yeah.
So the Remington Rands are, you know, they're serviceable. However, in our modern times, you get a little spoiled, right? So when you go from a Wilson Combat and Alchemy, you know, some of this nicer stuff, and you go to this, you think, oh, well, that's a piece of, you know, dog crap, but it really isn't. You have to understand what these guns, especially from the shooting perspective, what they were designed for, and that is what any military firearm is designed for, the lowest common denominator to use it. So what we also don't think about, too, in modernity is the cock and lock carry, or the myth of that being the original way that 1911s were meant to be used. Of course, these guns, up until Cooper really started popularizing the two-handed use of handguns, and of course cock and lock carry, these guns were mostly shot one-handed, okay? And they were mostly shot from you having to cock the hammer, similar to like a single action
or something,
you know, gun. Because keep in mind, for the cavalry board, especially when the guns were adopted, they came from single action armies.
Right. So they're used to cocking a hammer.
So, interestingly, too, you'll notice a few things about this gun when you shoot it. First of all, trigger, not great. But you have to understand that this was, you know, Martial firearm. Up until recently, you know, Martial firearms, really, you just had to have a trigger, you know? It wasn't necessarily how good it is, it's just a trigger. Also, keep in mind that most people in the, you know, when you see pictures of these guns, where are people's hands, you know? So a little heavier trigger isn't too bad of a thing. The trigger on the Remington Rand, it's probably about 5.5 pounds, maybe even more than that. I think spec on these was somewhere in the, somewhere like in the 6 to 7 pound.
Well, I mean, hell, that's still better than most polymer modern shit.
Absolutely. Most people shot the gun one-handed with their thumb kind of down like this. So when you're looking at this gun, it's really designed to have your thumb kind of under the safety, so you can fully depress the grip safety.
Yeah.
So when you shoot it, I'd shoot it one-handed, kind of like this.
Okay.
Ready?
I can do that.
All right.
Do some fudge shit here.
Also, it's probably interesting to note that left-handed people really weren't left-handed.
I was going to say,
at this point,
how am I supposed to use this?
If you were in the United States military in 1941, you would not have been left-handed.
Damn.
You would have been left-handed, but not really.
Damn. You know, the sights are actually not that bad, all things considered.
They're not that great either.
Well, they're not great, but I don't find the trigger to be I mean, it's so short.
This gun actually does have a better trigger than most guns I've felt.
Of course, I can't shoot, but
so I mean that is, and here's the deal, dude. Especially like more so with the Remington UMC being built in 1918, you're looking at the pinnacle of a handgun. And it's crazy because when you consider every handgun that was made at the turn of the century, nothing performs like a 1911 does.
Yeah.
It just is.
It still is fundamentally is still a good shooting gun.
Yeah, it's absolutely a good gun.
And what year is that?
This is 1943.
I mean, and it's still a nice gun to shoot.
I mean, again, we've been really spoiled by a lot of modern features.
Spoiled.
But, dude, when you get a hold of this and you think, hey, there's a Kraut coming at me, nothing's better than pointing a big 45 at him.
Spicy.
I mean, it's one of those guns that make you feel like an American.
Yeah, you feel good.
You know, you're like, let's go kick down the door of Europe, okay?
Yeah, warms the heart, really. Okay, so now we transition to post-war.
Yep.
And from my understanding, this is a fairly interesting era, largely because there's only one company really making commercial 1911s.
Yeah, so this is a pivotal era for the 1911 as well. There are a lot of things happening in the world of 1911s that really, this era becomes kind of the make or break, right? We're coming out of World War II. The small arms world as it is has exploded, obviously, as it always does post-war. A lot of new technology comes out. You know, it's kind of like, is the 1911 going to survive? It would be criminal of me not to quickly note Jeff Cooper. of Gunsight, of course. They're in the 50s and 60s. They had the Southwest Combat Pistol League, and he was crucial in modernizing not necessarily the 1911 itself, but how we shot 1911s. Prior to the end of World War II, most of the time it was single-handed,
kind of bladed off.
Kind of bladed off, right. He introduced the 1911 to the two-handed grip and began to adapt it for combative shooting in the modern world. So really, this is the make-or-break era, and this is also the era that custom guns begin to really take off. They are inspired heavily by the bullseye world, as we've talked about with the Colt Pythons before. They're inspired heavily by the bullseye world, but again, as that combat pistol league takes off in the Southwest, and then the practical shooting begins to get popularized, the 1911 kind of gets its second wind. So
sure.
Let's talk about it. Colt, as you mentioned, they are they pretty much are the only commercial manufacturer of 1911s up until 1970s, 80s. This is why Colts are so abundant.
It's just wild.
They were the only game in town. A lot of the early post-war guns were actually built on like World War II parts, like the late 40s guns.
Yeah.
They're built on World War II surplus parts, but they are finished beautifully.
Yeah.
Like they're actually a beautiful pistol because now we can take our time building these guns. We don't have to pump them out for some red-blooded American to put a 45 caliber hole in a German. So now we can take our time with them. They're considered some of the best base guns for a custom gun.
For doing a build. Okay.
Yes. Now, this is partly because this is when a lot of your famous builders start building on guns.
Okay.
It's also partly because a lot of folks just consider them some of the most beautiful roll marks, some of the most elegant pistols of the time. So, of course, it's kind of got both things going for it.
Sure.
It's a really popular era, the pre-70s series guns.
So if you were going to do, in the world of custom, if I'm like, hey, I want to do buy a good base gun and make some mods that I want to make, this would be in that zone. Absolutely.
Yeah, almost every builder loves a post-war pre-70 series Colt commercial.
Okay.
So like it's a really beautiful gun, and they always turn out like especially really classic guns always turn out beautiful. Jason Burton, Rob Sholin, these are two guys that build artwork.
Yeah.
And usually that is best shown on a gun of that period.
Okay.
So Colt actually began fully hardening the slides directly post-war. Remington Rand actually started doing it during the war, and they kind of stole that idea from them. And this is pivotal again for the custom gun world. The softer steel of pre-war guns, if you did a good frame to slide fit, would eventually loosen itself back up.
Yeah.
And quite rapidly, mind you. And so having that hardened steel is really a big help to a lot of these gunsmiths. So I do want to talk a little bit about buying these guns. Prices vary dramatically.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen guns from this era in the box going for $5,000, $6,000, $7,000. I picked up this gun is a little bit of an exception. It's been worked a little bit over. It's kind of getting piecemealed, but this gun I paid $2,500 for, and for its condition for a 45, that's too much. However, it's Super 38.
Okay.
Super 38s always, throughout 1911 history, command more money.
Okay.
They just how it is. They made less of them.
Just less of them.
And, they do have this mystique. So Super 38 gun of this era is going to be more expensive than a comparable 45.
Okay.
I bought a 52 Colt for like $1,500.
Okay.
In great condition. Actually, better condition than that. So,
okay.
The Supers are always going to be more expensive. So with that, let's talk about that gun. That's 1968 government model. Okay, and so this is right at the tail end, right at the tail end of everything. That gun has been worked over by Rob Sholin. It's had a trigger job and obviously the ring hammer done to it. I will eventually do a full build on this gun, but for right now, I kind of like, really the trigger was the only thing I had an issue with, and that's actually because Colt actually continued a lot of the 1911 A1 aesthetics to the commercial guns post-war. So it had a short trigger originally and an arch mainspring housing. Neither of those agree with my hand shape. So as you see, I have a really actually rare Wilson Combat lanyard loop.
I was actually wondering what that was.
It's the most gangster thing ever.
This little loop here.
So that was actually a gift from Ken Hackathorn because he has one that Jason Burton made on his gun, and I shot it, and I said, Ken, that's the coolest thing ever. So he had an extra one that Wilson Combat made. Unfortunately, they don't make them. Wilson, make those again. And then they did do a couple little small things, obviously fit and finish, but the thumb safety is different from a World War II gun. They kind of elongated the paddle a little bit, and it's pretty nice. I mean, I actually don't feel the need to go for a safety bigger than that, although it's pretty common in modernity. So these would have originally had like an injection molded plastic grip. Mine actually cracked on me, which is why that's wearing VZ, and that's also something to take into consideration. It's called Colt wood. It often shrinks over time and becomes extremely brittle. So when you are looking at an original gun of this, you definitely want to make sure you examine the grips. Sometimes if it's a collector piece, I say don't even take the grips off. Like I said, I took that gun out shooting, and when I came back, it developed a crack. And at that point, it's going to get worse. So I just took them off. But definitely check those for cracks because that's going to be something that could be prevalent on it. So, and with that is a good example of a lightly worked over, gun of that era that still kind of gives off a lot of the vibe.
Yeah, kind of vintage vibes.
They would have been spur hammers too, by the way. The ring hammer, interesting enough, the ring hammer was introduced during this time period. It was originally introduced on the Commander in 1949, okay? And it was marketed as the Mauser style ring hammer.
Boy.
Because the C96 broom handle
Mauser
I
got it.
had it.
Yeah.
Yes. So the Commander was originally offered in lightweight frame. You actually will only find lightweight frames. This is gonna go right into that next gun. You'll only find lightweight frames up until about the 70s, and then they started doing the Combat Commander, which is a steel frame.
Okay. Yeah. Because occasionally I'll see those lightweight Commanders, and they're cool.
They are cool.
They're kind of hard to find though.
And interestingly enough, that is when Colt introduced 9mm to the product line.
Okay.
So 9mm has been a part of the 1911 history for a long time. But in the vein of Commanders, that's a perfect segue to this gun. What you're holding is possibly the coolest gun I own from an objective standpoint. I've got two guns I like more than that one because they're emotional. They're from Ken Hackathorn, and obviously he and I are extremely close, and that they're emotional guns. But as far as objective coolness, that gun's the tits. Do people still say that? The tits.
You do. Yeah,
I do.
Yeah, you do.
So,
and I mean, who doesn't like a good set, right? I mean, come on. Really,
absolutely. I'm more of an ass guy.
Yeah, well, you going to turn down a good set?
Absolutely not.
Exactly.
So that gun started life as 1966 Colt government model, okay?
So this started as a 5-inch gun?
It started as a 5-inch gun. That is what we call in the business a Bobcat. And that was built by a Swede called Armand Swenson out of California. Okay, so Armand, I'm going to try really hard not to go down this route because I absolutely love the history of Armand Swenson. I'm going to have a full, probably hour video on this gun and Armand Swenson on my own channel. But for now, all you need to know, badass gunsmith and one of the fathers of the custom combat pistol. Okay, so when we think of where custom fighting 1911s came from, Armand Swenson's widely considered one of the leaders of that. Yeah. Now, King's in California also is in that realm, but Swenson's a little bit more famous. So that particular gun was actually bought, I want to say in 1968, by a young man named Jim Wood at the time. So Jim Wood, he was in college, and I don't know exactly I do all the details, but it's not important. He ends up getting a little letter saying, hey, you can either join the military, because let's think about what's going on in the late 60s. NAM. He's like, hey, you can join the military or we're going to kind of force you to join. So he ends up joining the Air Force. He sends off a gun. Armand Swenson, there was a feature on him in a guns magazine or a handgunner magazine. So he actually knew that the Air Force issued J-frame Smith & Wessons.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And he was like, that is absolutely not a fighting gun.
Wow.
He's correct.
Yeah, that is correct. I mean, come on.
Absolutely not a fighting gun. And so he was like, I want a big 45. So he actually sent that gun to Armand. I have the original letters between him and Armand on that gun.
That's
and
wild.
The original quote for that gun. I want to say that, I don't want, it was several, in today's money, it would have been several $1,000s for that gun to be built. So it's actually in line with a lot of custom guns today. But that gun, he then deployed to Vietnam in 1970. Armand actually gave preferential treatment to law enforcement and military.
Okay.
So this gun would actually go to Vietnam, Southwest Asia. In 1970, he carried in an M3 shoulder holster under his field jacket.
Badass.
So it's a pretty cool gun.
Configured.
Yes, the only difference, that gun actually had a set of Packmeyer grips on it when he carried it in Vietnam.
Okay.
With the middle of it, because they wrap around. The middle of it was cut out because, of course, he had checkering done to that gun.
Got it.
And after the Harriet stocks after Vietnam, like in the 70s, were like the shit, and I still think they're badass. So this is what he had on it when he got back from Vietnam, and I've kind of left it on there because
it's also cool.
I think they're super gangster.
Funky and
yeah. So it's got some special touches. I'm gonna hit them real quick, and like I said, I don't want to bog you down too much. So it actually has K-frame adjustable sights. So if you wanted adjustable sights on a gun, that was it. You could get a national match gun, but most people didn't. And that was like the original combat sights for a lot of people. It has the top matted. So if you see the top of the slide there, it's matted. That's done with a rat file, just hitting. You hit the top of the slide. I mean,
I can do that.
It's not. Yeah, absolutely you could.
So I could be a custom.
You absolutely could be a custom gunsmith.
Hell yeah,
in
bro.
the 60s.
Well, let me know if you guys are hiring.
It's got a thing called the barrel positioner. Because keep in mind, the big problem with vintage custom 1911s that people don't understand is there was not a parts market like there is today.
Sure.
And especially not this time period. You know where you get your parts from? Colt or surplus World War II, World War I parts. Neither of those are fantastic.
Sure.
So, the barrel positioner, because you don't have like these barrels, like these oversized barrels that you can fit, the barrel positioner is actually, and you won't be able to see it on camera, but I can show you. You see that discoloration right there?
Yeah.
So if we lock the gun open, you can actually see it right there.
Yeah.
And that makes sure the barrel is in the same exact lockup position every time.
Well, that's interesting.
While it's open, you'll notice a full-length guide rod. Super ahead of its time, by the way. It's got a squared and checkered trigger guard, as we mentioned, or as we're going to mention when we shoot the gun. By the way, when you see me shoot this gun, I'm literally shaking. I'm so nervous because I'd never shot this gun. This is the most expensive gun I own. I was so nervous something was going to break. I'm literally like this shooting the gun. But it worked and actually ran really well. So it's got squared and checkered trigger guard because at the time, the idea of shooting a handgun was wrapping your finger around the trigger guard like that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So that is what that gun has as well.
Not for lefties, though.
It has a crisp trigger, but the fun thing about that is Armand really didn't do true trigger jobs. He just kind of had a big box of sears, a box of disconnectors, and he kind of just would throw things in there until they started to work. You'll notice a commander hammer. The ring hammer, that was a very common touch for custom 1911s, of course, because you wouldn't get hammer bite.
Sure.
So you could have a shorter grip safety,
right? Yeah.
And you wouldn't get hammer bite,
right?
With a spur, obviously the spur hammer would give you that. It's got the front checkering, which is awesome. The front checkering feels great on the gun, and as we're going to note in a lot of these clips, if you see me reloading the older guns, it does have a beveled magwell. Because the magwell in the 1911, it leaves a lot stock to be desired. So they started opening up the magwells, and certainly they're much easier to load with the magwell. So that is a great example of honestly, guys. I'm biased. Like, that's my gun. That is one of the coolest 1911s you're gonna see on YouTube. And as far as what it means in the greater scheme of the modern fighting 1911, that is a huge step. Huge step. I mean, Armand made that thumb safety. Yeah, made it. It wasn't a part he had. He made that thumb safety.
Yeah.
I mean, this is just an incredible time that really brings us to modernity with 1911s. And we take that for granted so much. You take a thumb safety like that for granted now because it's standard.
Yeah.
But he had to make that part.
Yeah.
And so this era of 1911s is so important for so many different ways because it, to me, is the era that saves the gun, and it's the era that begins the modernization of the pistol as well, both in technique of using and in features.
Well, that would probably be a good time to show you shooting this bad boy.
So the next gun I got for you on kind of that post-war era, okay? And we've kind of touched on the custom side of that. That's when custom guns really started ramping up. There were custom guns before World War II, but post-war, people were really realizing like, hey, these guns, they have a lot of potential.
Yeah.
And this gun's probably the most...
Is this the most valuable gun you own?
This is the most valuable gun I own, yeah. So this is...
He's scared to death. He was scared to death.
Yeah, I hadn't shot it yet.
He was like, I'm not going to shoot it. We're like, but maybe, you know, gross
and there's
set
a
of the
couple
old
reasons
testes there.
There was a couple of reasons I didn't want to shoot this gun, and we won't really get into that because I don't want to bore people with it. But essentially, this is one of the most valuable guns I own and a really big piece of 1911 custom history and also U.S. Marshal history, honestly. But this is my Swenson. This is a Bobcat, so this started life as the 5-inch gun. But you'll notice, and again, I just shot this thing, but you'll notice it's a really crazy recoil impulse on this gun. I actually have never felt anything like it. When you shoot this gun, take note of that squared and checkered trigger guard. That was really popular from the Southwest Combat Pistol League. People wanted to have that because keep in mind, when this gun came out, we're like in its infancy of two-handed shooting, okay? You don't think about that. Two-handed shooting really didn't start until after World War II, and this is really one of the big things. They thought, oh, well, maybe we hooked the trigger guard to control recoil.
Sure.
So I'm going to pop a couple rounds through it, then I'll let you pop a couple rounds through it.
Yeah, let's hope she survives.
Yeah. And like when you shoot an old gun that hasn't been tricked out, and then you shoot this, you're like, oh, okay, I get it. And just for, you know, the sake of things, we're going to go trigger guard grip here.
Yeah, give it a go.
I'm still like shaking.
She
like
survived.
I'm so excited about this. I'm like shaking. I'm like looking at the gun like this, dude.
She survived 2 mags. Let's see if she can survive a 3rd.
That gun's epic.
I mean, it's clean chambering and everything.
Yeah, yeah. So anyways, yeah, get you a load of that. Isn't that sick?
Well, hang on, we got to lock
Oh, yeah.
back.
Well, no. You being a lefty, you locked the slide back.
I don't think so.
Yes, you did. I watched it. Because
How
you're
would I
pushing,
do that?
Because you're pushing on. Here's a great opportunity to talk about something. The HRT cut, why it came out. Because, you know, a lot of people wonder about that. You encountered the problem that a lot of people encountered that were left-handed, that have been cursed by the devil to be the wrong hand. You've just encountered the #1 problem they've had on 1911s. You were probably pushing on that slide stop pin, and you engaged the slide stop pin early.
Yeah. Okay, so you're thinking because of this
Well,
side.
first of all, using this modern grip on a non-modern gun, yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm a modern man.
And also, Swenson hadn't yet come out with his ambi safety. He was one of the first to do an ambi safety. Not the first, one of. And this gun predates that ambi safety, but it would have helped you here.
Interesting.
So just
okay.
watch that because that's
Let's
what
see.
you're doing.
I'll try to not contact it. Boy, that round, I don't know if you caught that on camera. That round ejected directly into my fucking
Probably
forehead.
because it hates you as a left-handed person.
I mean, it just smacked me in the forehead.
Look at that, dude.
It's a nice shooting gun.
I mean, it's fucking epic. I don't know what the language parameters are, but it's fucking epic.
We don't have any. We gave up.
So I'm so excited. I'm like jacked up, shaking. That's cool. That gun shoots. It shoots pretty good. Bobcats, by the way, historically weren't really reliable. So I'm glad it's been pretty good, you know, since then.
That's badass. You shot one of your heroes today.
Still shaking, man.
So it's a little criminal, but I can't actually recall having shot a 38 Super 1911.
It's Super 38.
Yeah, well, I Super 38, 38
Or
Super.
we just call it Triente Ocho.
Okay.
You didn't think I was going to use some Spanish on you.
No, I was not expecting
Listen,
that.
it's one of the baddest rounds ever made for a handgun, and it is criminal that we have 9mm when that exists.
Well,
I hate Europeans.
let's find out
The Mexicans are awesome.
how she shoots.
Look at that.
Yeah.
Fast reciprocating slide.
Yeah. And I'll be honest, these sights are not great.
Oh yeah. This gun is just begin its immersion to a custom gun. I'm going to eventually have it built. And these guns are really my favorite to build onto. I mean, it's a tight mag well. Yeah.
I was gonna say this mag's like, there she goes.
Again, mag wells didn't really become a thing until later on. They started beveling mag wells. Like on my 1969 Super, it was beveled, which is nice. But yeah, you need to have a beveled mag well on these guns.
Yeah, no, it's a fast gun returning. It's a fast return back down.
Super's a pretty hot cartridge. And as you mentioned, yes, it is the slider's reciprocating pretty fast. The cartridge was introduced in 1929, and like it was a pretty big deal when it came out. And it's again crazy to me that we have 9mm when that exists.
Yeah, that's a fun shooting gun.
I mean, is that not badass?
Yeah, that's.
And
a
here's
fun
the deal:
gun.
you've got your light recalling of your, that European shit you like, but it's a true blue American cartridge.
Guys, here's the deal. Even if you're into 1911s, now Eli would never, of course, want a red dot or a light or anything. He would just illuminate the room with his personality. But if you needed a light optics, you could need extra magazines. A good place to go do all of that would be Big Tex Ordnance. They've got everything from mags to lights to optics. Basically, all kinds of shit that you would see. And here is the kind of stuff that they carry. Good folks, patriotic company. They basically make everyone that works there shoot and train so they can distinguish good gear from bad gear. And so if you need any of that, check them out. A code you guys can plug in will save you 10% off their site would be 1911'SYN. Order shipped the same day. Obviously they're in Texas, so it's 2 p.m. Central Standard Time if you need to get that order out the same day. I was a customer of theirs, frankly, for a long time before they sponsored the channel. So it's kind of a fun thing for me to get to do some work with them because, like I said, I bought a bunch of stuff from them over the years. So check them out. They carry a lot more stuff than I just mentioned there, but that'll just wet your whistle a little bit. You can also check out our Patreon. If you guys need any behind the scenes stuff, you get first crack at whiskey when we do those releases a couple times a year now. All kinds of fun stuff, giveaways, yada, yada, yada. Anyway, let's get back on with the show. Okay, so now this category we sort of are labeling neo vintage, which is not really a technical term, but it's really sort
You're
of
neo vintage.
You know what? I'll take that because that's vintage is you're old. Neo vintage is like
Your new and
aging gracefully.
Sure.
I'll take neo vintage, but this is really still largely in the realm of Colts, but this is sort of the series era. Talking Series 70, Series 80. There's been I'm very excited for people to finally figure out what Series 80 is, so we can stop hearing about stupid drop tests.
Absolutely, and this is an era that expands the 1911. Up until this era, Colt's been really the only name in the game. So there's going to be some things that happen that really open up Colt and begin to open the marketplace up to other 1911s. So we'll jump right into it. You got Series 70, Series 80. Kind of the key features, besides markings, because I don't want to make that a big deal. But the key features, the Series 70 had what was called a collet bushing. Okay, and I'll show you a collet bushing in a little bit. It had a collet bushing, and this was a way to accurize the 1911 kind of on the cheap. And I'll be quite honest with you, the collet bushing is essentially, you've seen the regular 1911 barrel bushing. It's solid all the way around.
Yeah.
Collet bushings are actually spring steel, and they are bit in so that they're always kind of gripping the barrel, kind of giving it kind of being tight.
There's just something about the way you said that to me.
Gripping.
I don't know.
Now, if I say gripping like this, that's weird. Gripping here is okay.
Yeah, and you said later, you're like, I'll show you my collet bushing later. And I was like,
my collet bushing.
Okay.
So anyway, spring steel, it's gripping the barrel.
And it's Friday night, but shit.
And honestly, it's a pretty cool way to tighten the guns up for a production standpoint, because no one's fitting bushings like they are in the custom world for a production gun. Even today, doesn't happen. And then, of course, they also had like a new wood grip. I mean, that's like a super minor thing.
Yeah,
but,
basic.
Little things like that. But Series 80 comes along. They move back to the solid bushing because those collet bushings, they're excellent, but if you don't know how to take care of them, they'll break in the gun, and the gun's done. I mean, it's
no shit.
Like, the gun's not done, but you will not be back in the fight.
Oh, okay.
And what happens is Typically with the barrel bushing, you take it off the barrel, correct? With the collet bushings, the way that spring steel is, it's got like this kind of bell, this really heavy bell on the barrel. And if you pull it off, you have to obviously kind of pop it over to go back on, and it would weaken the spring steel over time. And those fingers, and you'll understand when I show you, those fingers are, expanding and contracting, and eventually they break.
Yeah.
So they kind of went back to the solid bushings. However, my gun actually had a leftover part. It's also important to note that Springfield Armory kind of comes into the game here, and this is now Springfield Armory as you know it.
That we know.
Not Springfield Armory, the U.S. Ordnance.
Yes.
So Springfield Armory comes into the game. The big thing for Springfield Armory is that they're offering, a lot of features that Colt buyers wanted, that were popular in the custom gun market, but weren't popular on Colt's bone stock. The Springfield Armory custom shop made race guns for competitive shooting. Colt tried, but they never really had the success. One major thing that Springfield Armory does at this time is they sign Robbie Latham.
Okay.
Robbie Latham is a machine gun. He's basically himself as an unregistered machine gun with a handgun. And Rob wins multiple, world titles. He actually shoots one of these early on in the 80s.
Ellie Comp.
And wins a couple of world titles.
Okay. Cool.
And actually, I think one was a two-tone and one was a hard chrome gun.
Okay. Hell
And
yeah.
I can get more into that, but it's a different video. So, Rob Latham really, really, really helps to expand the brand. Everybody goes, well, I want to, shoot like Rob Latham. I got to have a Springfield Armory 1911.
Sure.
That's towards the end of the 80s, and that really starts to build Springfield's marketplace. Other people were kind of starting to say, hey, man, I kind of want to get a piece of that action, IPSC and IDPA were really popular. Practical and combat style shooting competitions were really big back then, and people were like, yeah, I kind of want to get in on that. Colt had a major thing happen, and Colt has been a company strife with many unfortunate, things. I mean, even back to early in the company's history, when the factory burned in 1864. This is just after Sam Colt himself died in 1862. So, I mean, the history of Colt is one of plenty of issues. And this one is a big one. So, in 1986, they have a labor union strike. It gets pretty rough for Colt.
This is Colt strike.
Yeah, like the union workers go on strike.
Okay.
They go on strike till 1990.
Oh, wow.
Colt's trying to produce guns during this era, and they're basically the kind of old man saying is that they're putting office guys back in, because the office people are not union. They're not unionized. They're putting office people back in trying to build guns. And historically among old Colt collectors, okay, I'm just kind of, I'm letting the old spirit speak through me. I'm letting the FUD come out. Historically, Colts of that time period are usually not held to very high standards.
Well, yeah, I mean, Doris from accounting.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
This gun's actually 1985. It's a good segue into this. So this is just directly before the strike. Okay. So it's 1985 Colt government model. This is actually my first carry gun. Mm-hmm. Thought it was pretty important to bring the gun out. This is a Series 80, of course, that has the firing pin disconnect. And Lord, let's take a minute.
Yeah, I think this is an important conversation.
So the 1911, designed to be used on horseback. People don't understand that. It was designed by, it was designed with people on horseback in mind. The cavalry board at the table when they went to adopt the pistol was the biggest player in the game. Okay? There were a few things that when the gun was being developed that the cavalry board really pushed for. And of course, they understood you people don't. The cavalry board understood it's an inertia-driven firing pin. And most of the time, they didn't carry with a round in the chamber anyways. Mm-hmm. But they wanted to have, some sort of automatic safety. Okay, so that's where the grip safety comes into play. Other than that, there's really no good way to stop an inertia firing pin. Okay, later, in the pre-war era, the
inertia firing pin. To be clear,
yes.
if I were this gun is cocked, or I guess it doesn't even really matter if it's cocked. I guess effectively, right?
Yeah.
But essentially, it's like, hey, if I were to drop this from a fucking horse
barrel
or from
first.
right here, and the gun impacts that way, the firing pin is still moving that way towards a primer,
Yeah.
right? I mean, effectively.
Yeah.
Wrong? Or you can say
no,
wrong.
no, that's right. No,
Right.
you're right.
Which can torch off a round.
Yeah, because the firing pin's floating in a firing pin channel, and it's a full-length firing pin. So the part that the hammer hits is directly attached to the part that hits the primer. Okay, and this kind of sits like this, and it's spring-loaded. And if you drop it, there's enough inertia in that heavy firing pin. Later on, Springfield famously does a titanium firing pin. It's lightweight, doesn't have enough, mass to really do that. But Colt didn't have that at the time. The 80s were a time much like now, actually, where people were idiots and they kind of had forgotten all this old stuff. Like, hey, don't drop your gun. The sumbitch could go off. Like, this was things that back in the day they were just like, yeah, of course, know. Of course it will.
Yeah.
And we kind of forgot about that. And so in the 80s, a lot of firearms companies are coming under a lot of heat. It's much like the automotive industry, actually. If you think about cars in the 80s, a 1987 Monte Carlo will have a 305 in it, and it puts out like 180 horsepower.
Yeah.
It's kind of that same era. Safety's a major concern. So they institute a firing pin block, essentially. And there's good diagrams of how that works, but essentially the firing pin is not released until the trigger begins its rearward movement. Now, Colt had actually tried to do this early in the pre-war era with the Schwartz safety, but that was attached to the grip safety. The grip safety had to be 100% put in, 100% put in to allow the gun to fire.
Damn.
And Guess how long that lasted?
Yeah, not very long.
Not long. And guess who still wanted to use it? Guess who used it in modernity? Kimber.
I was just going to say Kimber because that
sounds like something they would do.
Right.
So, anyways, the firing pin essentially what it is there's kind of these two levers that one is pushed up against the back of the trigger bar.
Yeah.
As the trigger's pressed, it kind of fulcrums this lever up. That lever pushes on this kind of pin that's spring-loaded, and that's where you get the mushiness of the historic Series 80 trigger.
Yeah.
There's basically you have spring pressure pushing against your trigger.
Yep.
And so that's where kind of the bad trigger comes from. That's a great one to show it on.
Right.
So that plunger there, and this is a quick and dirty way to open the gun up. If it's Series 80, you'll be able to tell. That little circle right there. And so, and
it leads to a shit trigger.
It's not a great trigger.
More safe gun and and you took the best trigger in the world and you made it shit.
Yeah. I mean, again, compared to modern striker-fired firearms, it's still a good trigger.
Yeah, but...
and you can make them better. Like, there are ways to polish the components, lighten the spring pressure in the slide. There's ways to make them good, but overall, they're never going to be as good as a Series 70 or a traditional 1911.
Well, if I may go on a very quick rant.
Yeah, go ahead.
There's been all this discussion. I mean, at this point, this is first quarter 2025. So we'll call it 2024, roughly summertime. I'm sure some of you are, maybe clued into what I'm talking about. There's been popular media that came out of, dropping guns for some reason. I'm not quite sure why. And seeing what goes off, and multiple 1911s or 2011s go off, and the thing that is left out of some of that stuff is, hey, this has been shit that's been known about for like a century.
Yeah,
like
you're not Christopher Columbus, man.
Yeah. This wasn't education, and the reality is, like, hey, if you want to educate people, how about explain why that's happening? Because this is very explainable shit that is chose to not be explained for the sake of, let's get some views and let's piss people off. And everyone who's into 1911s, then for the next 6 months, every time you post a fucking 1911 video or photo, you have 20 people in the comments being like, what is a drop safe? Shut the fuck up.
And it's funny because actually, as a guy who works for a manufacturer, I had people telling me that we as a company were irresponsible if we didn't make guns Series 80.
It's so
We're
stupid.
Irresponsible if we make them Series 80. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, it's so stupid.
It is truly one of the dumbest things that's happened. And the problem that I have is not that was shown. It's as you mentioned, it's the fact that it was never explained
Very simply.
what happens, why it happens. It was just like, oh, well, I guess that's not safe.
Yeah, they're not safe.
And then
Okay.
let's move to the next gun.
Right.
So yeah, and just to illustrate a little bit, just very quickly, you'll notice this kind of lever here, this lever here. As I begin my trigger pull, you see it moving?
Oh yeah, yeah.
So there's really no resistance. I mean, I'm hitting where the trigger would break right there.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no resistance. Where the resistance comes into play is on that spring, that spring tension there.
Right.
That's what you're fighting.
Yeah.
And this one's pretty, old, so
Yeah.
it actually has a pretty decent trigger. But newer guns like that one, they're not great.
No.
But while I have this gun apart, I do want to take a quick, brief moment to show you the collet bushing. Again, this being an earlier 80 series gun. 80 series started in 1983. Okay, so being an earlier gun in 1985, this gun actually has a leftover collet bushing.
Yeah.
So that collet bushing, and you can see, look, this isn't a production gun. Look at how tight it gets at the top.
Boy, that's pretty crazy.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
Like this is, I actually think this is a really cool feature. But like I said, if you start pushing this on and off,
Yeah, it's going to
you'll
expand and
weaken that.
contract.
Now, I always tell people, if you get a collet bushing gun and you don't get it converted, never ever take it off the front of the gun.
Okay.
Always just slide down, do whatever you need to do to clean your gun, and slide it back up. And you'll actually also want to know that when you are taking it apart, which you can't show, thank you, YouTube, the gun is going to be sitting, when you pull the slide off, you should definitely take it off the reverse high power way, okay? The barrel is going to be in battery, right? And this is why I don't like the GI method. When you have that slide with the barrel like this, you are going to want to actually take the barrel out of battery, because now it moves freer. The bushing is meant to go this way. It's not meant to turn.
Okay.
So when you have it in battery and you're cranking on it, you're like cranking on your barrel to bushing fit. The barrel and the bushing relationship is this way, not this way. This way.
Sure, yeah.
As all relationships
Yeah,
should.
it's just, I don't know. There's a lot going on there.
So anyways, I think it's really cool. You may not, but moving on.
No, I was just your hand gestures. Just
Moving on, because I know that this is a long video. So I want to talk about probably the most fun gun we shot yesterday. I mean, other than the 44.
Yeah, look, if there's something from this video that just really climbed on my list of like once, I got to admit, yeah, that's her.
Yeah, so you go ahead and pick that thing up. That right there, son, is a Wilson's Gun Shop, LE Comp. You know what LE stands for?
I assumed law enforcement, but it doesn't really make sense. No. Yeah.
Latham Enos.
Oh, damn. Okay.
Because Brian Enos and Robbie Latham both were big-time contributors to the development of that gun. The bill drill was made to test this gun.
No shit. God, it's such a hard lockup. It's just badass.
Great fitting gun from the 80s.
Yeah.
So this is the quintessential 80s custom gun. Because again, practical shooting had started to become impractical shooting, and competition was really popular. And this was, okay, now we're going to start gaming it. And the comp is a fantastic way to game. And honestly, can't stand ports. Love me a comp gun. So this is a full house Wilson's LE comp. I have 3 of them. And again, as someone who doesn't usually like to repeat guns, because I'm so young, I want to get all sorts of different stuff. To own 3 of the same gun is a big deal. It tells you something.
Tells you something, yeah.
And you found out what that something was, and it's that those guns are fan-fucking-tastic.
I really want one before this video comes out, because I'm like, damn it.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you'll notice too, that gun has a good trigger, because it actually does have the top end of its 80 series taken out of it. So it's got a fantastic trigger.
Feels like a Series
Fantastic
70,
trigger.
a good clean Series 70 trigger. Yeah.
And so this gun has a comp. Now, we have to talk about comps on 1911s because people don't understand. And maybe you don't either, but I'm curious. How do you think that comp reduces recoil? Like the primary way that comp reduces recoil?
I mean, I would say it's gas is coming up, so we drive the muzzle down. I mean, that's kind of the
Not
idea.
necessarily.
I mean,
yes, that is a component of it. The gas is going up will help drive the pistol down, kind of. Where this is epic. I get so horny over this shit. So where this actually does, if you'll look in there, look at that comp, you see how it looks like a suppressor baffle kind of in there. That one's actually pretty clean. So what that comp is doing is I guess I can't say the R word, but it's slowing down. I mean this scientifically. It retards the barrel unlocking, which then softens the recoil as it slows everything down.
Okay. It's like a delay. It's like a delay system.
Essentially, the blast is pushing forward on the comp. The barrel wants to, as in a short action recoil pistol, like a 1911, the barrel wants to come back down. Okay, so now it's fighting itself and delaying itself as it comes back down.
Huh. Okay. Interesting.
It is epic, and what comes of that is truly one of my favorite guns to shoot.
Really nice gun to shoot.
It doesn't even feel like a 45.
No.
In fact, it feels like, in my opinion, the recoil impulse is very similar to a stock Super 38, and that's a 45. The Super 38 versions of these guns, I don't have one yet, I want one real bad, are incredible because they have more muzzle energy and they're really able to take advantage of the comp, especially in the upward direction too.
Sure.
45 can't really take so much advantage of it.
Yeah, it's just not a very hot rail.
And then if you did want one of these, and they're rare, I got a buddy who has one and I want it real bad, but if you did want one of those for street carry, they did make a Commander version.
Damn.
They did make a Commander version.
Yeah.
And it's just one of the sickest guns. Like if you said get a 1911 that defines the 80s, that is it for me.
I like it. Well, let's go shoot the damn thing.
All right, so you've shot a lot of 1911s in your day.
Mm-hmm.
As far as non-new production custom guns, a lot of categories there. You will probably think that's the best shooting 1911 you've ever fired.
It's like I'm already drawn to this.
Yeah, I mean, you like 80s stuff, and that is peak 1980s 1911.
Yeah, and so this is a Series 80, but basically with the shitty Series 80 stuff taken out.
All of the slide internals for that Series 80 gun have been pulled.
Thank God.
So yeah, thank God, of course. Look, it's got an ambi safety for you.
It does.
But it does not have the HRT cut, so don't be pushing on that slide.
Yeah, I saw that. Ooh, boy, it's clean.
Yeah. Also, very blasty, so you prepare for basically a howitzer going off.
Dang, that comp
Is that
does
not
some
awesome?
work. That comp does some work.
Tell me that's not one of the most fun 45s.
That is a really fun 45.
Tell me that doesn't put a little tang on the dangle, man.
I like that one. You want to run, man?
Oh, hell yeah.
I could get sold on one of those real quick.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of that.
Yeah,
big fan of that
it's honestly, dude, it's one of the most pleasurable shooting experiences in a vintage custom 19. Nothing's going to beat it.
Yeah.
There are some, now this was the era of comp guns, so there are more than just Wilson LE comps. However, the Wilsons are the most iconic.
Yeah.
And this in Super 38.
Oh my God, I bet that is nice.
It's nuts. But
or that and a Commander.
Oh yeah, so Wilson did make one as like their street gun.
If anyone is in need of getting rid of one of those,
I've definitely carried this gun just like this. I mean, because here's the deal, dude. I've shot my best bill drill with this gun. I've shot like all my fastest 45 stuff has been with this gun. So I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, well, if I'm in a self-defense situation, like it would be like an artillery barrage.
Yeah, this is also what. Hey, look, Wilson makes a lot of stuff these days.
Wilson, just make this.
Yeah,
just
that
make
back.
this.
I know you've got notions of some of your limited stuff right now. Yeah, just bring that back to that LE comp.
And like, even amongst like modern custom 1911s, it still holds its own.
Oh, it did.
So we're gonna go the complete opposite direction from that to my first carry gun. A bone stock other than the Colt grips with Colt screws, by the way. I don't like Colt at all. Bone stock Series 80 gun. You're going to notice it's not the greatest trigger, but compared to a lot of modern 80 series gun, actually not too bad. So I'll let you give that a gander.
Okay.
Dude, when I got this gun originally, I took my concealed carry class with it. I thought I was the coolest dude that's ever walked the planet.
I mean, it's better than a Springfield XD.
Listen, it's a bone stock Colt. That thing's throwing brass every which way. It don't even matter. But guess what? At the end of the day, she does the job.
It still runs, though.
It does, man. You know, and I will say I'm not a big fan of the short trigger, right? So the short trigger doesn't really do it for me.
Yeah, it's kind of its own thing.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of that. But, and I don't like arch mainspring housings either now. But I will tell you, this gun, if you said, hey, you have to carry that gun the rest of your life, hell, that wouldn't be a bad deal. And when I took my concealed carry class, I was such a FUD. I mean, not much has changed.
I was gonna, yeah, I mean.
I shot the whole thing belt like this.
Yeah.
The whole class I shot like this.
Yeah.
And listen, you know, the guy probably would have said, hey, don't shoot like that. But in a class full of J-frames and shitty 22s, I was doing the best and he was just going to let it ride.
Held your own.
All right, so modern production to cap the whole thing off. It's really where things kind of get crazy, and hell, most people, this is probably where their 1911 journey exists.
Sure.
Is stuff
and
like
there's
this,
nothing
you
wrong
know?
with that.
No, it's totally fine. I mean, look, even truthfully, it's like, hey, that's basically all my shit. I've had some older stuff before, but truthfully, right now, my 1911 collection is basically all modern production stuff. So, I mean, we're basically talking 90s and on at this point.
Absolutely. Yeah, you have that explosion in the market. Kimber gets in the game. You know, of course, as we spoke last, the Springfield Armory's in the game. Everyone starts to realize that's a great market. And let's be honest, there's more companies making 1911s today than any other gun.
Oh, it's
other
crazy.
than maybe AR-15s.
Sure.
AR-15 is probably the only exception, just because
Sure.
they're so easy to make. But I mean, you can get 1911s now for as little as $300, and you can spend literally as much money as you want on one now.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I brought a T-sauce on the table just as an illustration of, hey, you know, sometimes folks might want to go, hey, dropping $1,000 on a good base Colt or Springfield or something like that might not be in the budget. It's like, hey, look, I'm a big proponent of, hey, look, if you need to dabble in something just to sort of wet your whistle and see if you're even interested, go for it. There ain't nothing wrong with getting $400. No, it's Turkish, so you might, you know.
Well, so I've had a big come to Jesus meeting over that, and I'm telling you, if that gun gets people into 1911s,
Yeah, that's what I'm
okay
saying.
with it.
Same.
And I'll be honest with you, they make a clone of the World War II gun.
Yeah, it's
and
pretty cool.
Fantastic.
It's actually pretty cool.
It's really a good clone.
Yeah, and like, you know, it's not meant to be a damn T-sauce ad, but the reality is like, hey, at that price, I mean, they make a damn good gun that for a lot of people can be the gateway drug.
And but hear me on this. I don't think this is where your journey ends.
No.
No,
Well, hopefully not.
Hopefully that's not where your journey ends.
Hopefully not. But it's like, you know, look, you can go from entry level to, you know, I mean, I think we're both kind of a fan of the TRP.
Yeah, absolutely. 20
TRP.
LPI is fantastic.
Yeah, great. Yeah, she's an aggressive grip, but it's like, you know, you've got a lot of
It's a good workhorse gun.
You know, it's like Wilson Combat, obviously still making stuff. You know, I've got my Nighthawk, because then you start playing in, you know, sort of the, I wouldn't call it custom, but I would say it, you know,
I mean, semi-custom.
Custom-ish, semi-custom.
Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of people get that wrong.
Sure, that's a video for another day.
That's a different day.
And
But now we're doing dots and you know magwells and you know all you know we get wild once we get into modern production.
Sure. Well, and two, there are still some companies like Alchemy Custom Weaponry that can give you a classic and beautiful 1911 if you want modern features, but you like the traditional and
like this is a great gun.
Oh God.
Yeah, I mean this thing's really cool.
This gun is my personal carry gun. This is one of our Resto Mod series pistols. The classic government obviously inspired heavily by the pre-war era, which is my favorite era. But you know, in a modern take that gives you the advantages of everything that we've learned over the past century of shooting a 1911.
Yeah.
So you know you can spend as much as you want, you can spend as little as you want, but the reality is, and I've come to real grips with this. The reality is, just get a damn 1911. Okay, at this point, just get a fucking 1911. Okay, put down this polymer shit. There is a 1911 for you. Okay, you like the weird tricked out stuff? Look at that. It's got a 10 nitride barrel or whatever they call that.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I mean, if you swing that way, that's fine. You need them in a little Worcester caliber? They got it.
That's a 9mm.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, they've got that, you know? If you're one of those people who all of your, you know, arguments around handguns end up with something about bears being present, 10mm is even available.
Yeah, there are a lot of people shooting bears.
Yeah, like
how many of you are under fucking bear threats?
Yeah, it's always bears. Like 10mm goes straight to bears. That's
Right.
it's straight where it goes.
Like never oh, what if I'm in the ocean and a great white's coming after me? It's always like, how many of you are in bear countries?
And it's like, dude, like you work a 9 to 5 as an IT guy. You don't need a 10 millimeter. You know what I mean? Like, so anyways, but there is a flavor for you no matter which way your door swings. Tons of calibers, tons of different configurations. You can get them as small. I mean, you know, the officers' guns came out in the 80s. You have a little bit of an improved officer's gun.
Yeah, I mean,
there.
like, look, you know, that is my carry gun. You know,
Yeah,
like tried and true,
small,
like daily
lightweight
carry
gun.
gun, lightweight frame. You know, it's like, look, you can purposely, you know,
You got a
sort
stupid
of
Chinese dot on that thing. That's kind of un-American, but whatever.
Yeah, well,
China.
You know, yeah. Well, you know, there's not a lot of American dots though. It's the problem.
Well, just have no dot. That's the solution. That rear sight was made in America. I like them apples.
Yeah, okay.
So, anyways, 1911s are awesome. Understand that this is not a stop. It's a journey.
Yeah.
And you're going to probably, once you get the bug, you're going to be like, yeah, one 1911 is not enough. And along the way you'll be accosted by folks who are of weaker constitution and say, oh, you know, that's a FUD gun, this, that, and the other. And I say to them, one of those. Okay, how about two of those? Little Stone Cold Steve Austin, baby. I got no purpose in having one of these. It's just doesn't do it for me.
You don't like this?
No. You got one life. Is that the gun you want? You know, when you get to the pearly gates, you spent your entire life with that. You know, let's think about
It's
it.
a nice plastic though.
You know what? Teddy Roosevelt didn't carry one of those.
No.
George Patton didn't carry one of those.
No, they didn't make them.
John Wayne didn't carry one of those.
No, they didn't make them.
And you know why? Wasn't around. But the fact is that no one's ever going to be like, that's an iconic Glock. Okay? You're an American. You owe it to yourself. You owe it to your bloodline. Okay? We've talked about it. No one wants to be given that at the end of your life. Okay? When I pass, I hope if I have multiple children, that it's a gladiatorial event at who gets dad's guns.
Right. Like the Ultimate Warrior and Hogan going at it.
And honestly, I'm not going to leave them. I'm going to say the winner at the end who is not dead
Who survives?
receives my guns.
Yeah, survivor wins.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, nobody, if that came down, if, you know, the Glock is on the line, we'll just shake hands and part ways.
Sure. Yeah.
But I'm telling you,
It's a positive
1911,
note to end it. Yeah, I like it.
there's a 1911 for everybody.
with your name on it.
Yeah. So, you know, get you one.
Get you one. We'll get you next week.